And we begin with more on the growing billion-dollar welfare fraud scandal, which is currently enveloping Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. With public outrage escalating dramatically, reports now revealing that Democratic squad member and far-left Congresswoman Ilhan Omar has a number of unquestionable ties to both the cowardly scheme itself as well as the people who actually perpetrated it. Now, to refresh your memory, the horrendous scam took place during the COVID-19 pandemic and involved a number of nonprofit organizations ostensibly created in Minnesota to feed the state's hungry school children. Instead, fraudsters, they skimmed the cash and used it to fund their lavish lifestyles. Reprehensible. According to the aforementioned reports, a great deal of the $1 billion ripoff took place in Omar's congressional district right under her nose. She herself introduced the bill, which allowed organizations to be reimbursed with taxpayer money for feeding kids and ultimately led to $250 million worth of theft. Even worse, the congressman personally knew several people who've been convicted for taking part in the scam and ripping off millions of dollars, including one of her own staff members. However, despite all the mounting evidence linking her directly to the perpetrators of the hoax, the Somali immigrant still claims she had no idea what was going on. As a result, critics are now accusing her of either being willfully ignorant, completely naive, or simply knowing and not really caring. You want more proof? How about this one? One local business owner was found guilty of stealing more than $12 million for serving phantom meals during the pandemic. He just happens to be the co-owner of the restaurant where Omar held her congressional victory party, and that was in 2018. She also hung out on a regular basis and was photographed often with another scammer who worked directly on her political campaigns, was a Democratic activist as well, and pocketed millions from this epic con job. Now, for her part, Omar has called the scheme reprehensible, and her team claims she never knew anything about it. Well, maybe. In the meantime, earlier this week, both Congress and the Treasury Department launched new investigations into whether or not Minnesota Governor Tim Walz could have done anything about it any time sooner. Final thought, this is the News Roundup Lowdown. Now, it's interesting to note that under the ever-watchful eye of the esteemed Congresswoman from Minnesota, the legendary Ilhan Omar, an enormous amount of taxpayer dollars, which were set aside to feed hungry children, it's been pilfered. Much like her fellow Democrat, the governor of the fine state of Minnesota, Tim Walz, the Timmer, neither of them have done anything unsavory, underhanded, or unethical, and they had no knowledge of any wrongdoing. It's kind of like Schultze from that TV show Hogan's Heroes. They knew nothing.
I know nothing.
If Madam Omar is going to claim ignorance, then at the very least she's incompetent and should step away from her job immediately and maybe hand over the reins to a low-level college kid who's out of class in Money Management 101 or ethics or political science or maybe underwater basket weaving, and he or she would easily do a superior job. Here's the bottom line. When millions and millions of dollars are set aside to provide food for needy children, and all that dough ends up in the hands of a bunch of ne'er-do-wells, then someone has to be held accountable. And as the representative of Minnesota's 5th Congressional District, that someone, it's the ill one, Ilhan Omar. Indictments, arrests, and convictions, but she's entirely innocent. Hey, producer Davey, it sounds like something we've never come across in Democrat politicking. Fraud and corruption. What are you thinking?
Yeah, Bill, look, clearly this congresswoman is connected to some really questionable people. Yeah. And even if she's not guilty, look, there's enough there to question her judgment and obscure whatever message she's trying to deliver.
Yeah, well, I take it a step further. I say don't blame Ilhan. Don't blame the Timber. And instead, I say we put the blame on anybody who was goofy enough, dumb enough to vote for either of them. And by the way, if you have any thoughts, comments, anything on Governor Walz or Ms. Omar or anything else we yak about here on the program, drop us a note, and we're at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. That is an epic fail.